does Bruce tell us when he starts filming?
Usually they click on when you call to order, so
You're gonna make the
we're on time.
When I ask for motion, you'll say, so moved.
I so move. Okay.
And then she will second.
Whatever we agree upon.
Yeah, yeah, that's fine. Well, we're only doing the minutes for now, and then,
We have to call the meeting to order.
all right? I'd like to call the meeting to order. First order of business, we'll review the minutes. You've had the minutes. If you have any questions on them, you can entertain them. Otherwise, I'd accept a motion to approve as written.
I so move to approve as written.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, minutes are approved.
Okay.
Okay, next, Robin, our town administrator, would like to say a couple of words, and then we can continue our discussion.
Thank you all for coming, and I want to thank Ann, our tax assessor, and our Board of Assessors for coming as well and sort of opening the floor up to everybody, because there are so many questions, and it's better when we get everybody either in a room or collectively where we can take the general concepts, deal with them up front, and then individually things can be dealt with at a separate time. But there are a lot of questions, and there's a lot of confusion regarding revals, and it's probably one of the most confusing aspects of municipal finance, are revaluations. Just a couple of basic things to understand. The budget and the reval are not the same thing. We do not gain money from the reval, and I know that sounds counterintuitive. We can only increase the total tax levy based on real estate property outside of new growth. So a new building comes in, that's a little different. But your taxes as they are, collectively, not individually, collectively based on real estate, we can only increase the total of that pot by 2.5% a year. So we can't say, okay, we're going to do a reval, not lower the rate per thousand, and you know what, we're going to bring in two more million extra this year, and our total increase is going to be 5%. It doesn't work that way. The number that we have to come out with and balance out with right now based on this is what the budgeted levy number is for property tax. That's why theoretically, some people would see, if we didn't, let's say we didn't put a 2.5% increase on the levy next year. Let's say we were able to flat, which realistically most communities can't, costs go up. Most communities do raise about the 2.5 or vote for overrides, which is separate, and you would vote on those. And Sturbridge has not done an override, I don't believe, in years. Barbara's here. Not in any kind of recent history. So 2.5's been the number since Proposition 2.5 went in. And basically what that means is that's all we can put on the real estate growth. So when you do a reval, here's the median value. So let's say for the sake of argument, every home on average, the median value went up 10%. If you went up more than that 10%, you're going to get what you might feel is a disproportionate increase compared to somebody else who went up less. If we flat budgeted next year, theoretically, the people who went up less than the median would actually see a slight decrease in taxes. The reason they never really see that is because we typically going to add 2.5 on the levy, so there's always a little bit of an increase, sometimes minimal, sometimes more, depending on where you fall with that median increase. So I'm probably simplifying it a little bit, and it might be a little more nuanced than that, but just to give you sort of a general understanding. And again, whatever this number turns out to be, I hate to use the word redistribution, but effectively it is a reallocation of where the funds come from, and they'll get into the details on how that reallocation happens. That's their world on real estate values and all sorts of stuff. But from my standpoint on budgeting, I don't look at this and say, oh, wow, these values went up. I get an extra, so many million to spend. It doesn't work that way. All I will have next year as an increase to spend is from your property taxes is going to be an increase of 2.5 overall. For some people, it will be more than a 2.5. For others, it will be less. But the average increase on the total property tax collection can only be budgeted at 2.5% more. Why do our budgets go up sometimes 3.5%, 4.5% if I can only raise 2.5? because state aid goes up, grants might be rolled into that, local receipts might be higher. Sturbridge, in fact, has one of the highest percentages of restaurant and hotel receipts by percentage in the Commonwealth. Those numbers go up, those numbers improve, we have more money to spend. And when we set the budget, we do it based off those numbers anticipated. So we take, when we set the budget and we propose a budget, we think about how much we're going to have to spend. We're looking at a 2.5% growth on the levy. What we anticipate for new growth, new buildings coming on board, major renovations to a home will increase that because that's considered new growth. If you do like a major renovation on your home, obviously your home, you're going to have a different value there. But from what your general property tax is, if you didn't pull out any extensive building permits or whatever, add it all together collectively, that's all we can increase. Otherwise, the increases in the budgets come from other places. So I just kind of wanted to give a little budgeting overview, even though this really isn't about budgeting today. It gets morphed into that because understandably as taxpayers, you say, well, where's this money going? What you're going to see is that the rate per thousand is going to drop, what, like 56 cents? So while your value went up so much, your rate per thousand goes down. So based on that letter, you can't just presume if you went up 20%, your increase isn't going to go up that much because you're going to be paying less per thousand. Now again, are those on the lakes going to see a little higher on that redistribution? Yes, and they'll explain why that happened. So I thank you again for coming. I'm happy to answer budgeting questions anytime you have them. You can always come by my office or email me. Many of you know how to find me and have already reached me before for different things. So please, always feel free if you have questions on how that works. It is complicated, and how assessing and the budget work together is a complicated financial thing, and it's unlike anything you might see in a private sector, for example. So it is a little bit confusing sometimes. And again, happy to answer any questions on that front for you, but I want to turn it back to Paul and his team for the rest of the meeting.
Thank you, Robin. As Robin indicated, we're here to discuss the changes in the residential property assessments for waterfront properties. I'm Paul Murphy.
Speak up a little bit?
Sure, absolutely. I'm Paul Murphy, Chair of the Board of Assessors. With me are my fellow board members, Maura McGrath and Lorraine Herbert. One note, Maura has to leave a little bit through the meeting due to a prior scheduled appointment. Also here is Ann Murphy, who is the Principal Assessor for Sturbridge. The Assessors Department is regulated by the Department of Revenue, specifically the Bureau of Local Assessment. We will provide some background on what the DOR, Department of Revenue, requires us to do each year. We'll then describe what the data we look at is and to how we do what they require us to do. The process required to establish property values is fairly involved. Ann will lay this out for you. You may have questions on various parts of it. Ann has a lot of detail, so we would ask that you hold your questions until she has finished. She may be about to answer your question. We will then be happy to take questions of a general nature on anything that she's covered. This is not really the forum for questions on specific properties. For these types of questions, we would encourage you to set a time to speak with Ann at the assessor's office. Ann will now detail the process of determining property values for the Department of Revenue to certify.
So first of all, I want to let you know that all properties in Sturbridge had an increase in value, not just lakefront. The board decided as a considerate gesture to send letters to lakefront properties only because they had a higher impact in their value increase than the rest of the town. The rest of the town's increase is more in line with what it normally is. So that's why we sent out the letters to you. The assessors are regulated by Mass General Laws, Department of Revenue, and the Bureau of Local Assessments in how we assess all properties. We cannot bend the law, circumvent the law, or manipulate the law. We just have to follow the law. The DOR doesn't allow for any bias in how we assess the properties. The assessors do not choose whether property values go up or down. It's the sales market that's doing that. For a history note, The average single-family value in Sturbridge has increased over the past 10 years. In 2005, the average single-family value was $255,625. And now, in 2025, that new value, single-family value, is $482,803. That's the increase over the last 10 years. So why do we change values every year? Well, one is Mass General Laws requires us to do that. They require our values to be at 100% of full and fair cash value. The Department of Revenue has created rules and regulations to allow a median value to be within a range of 90 to 110%. We have to meet all the legal standards, and if the values are not within those ranges, our values don't get certified. If our values don't get certified, we don't get a tax rate. So prior to the review of the 2025 values, all the properties were within this range. That's where we start. Then we reviewed the calendar sales from 2023. Those are the sales that impacted your values for 2025. We're always a year behind the market. The property values have to be within that range. They were not. The lakefront properties were at a range of 71. The rest of the town's properties were at a range of 87. So that shows us where the property values are, and we know that we need to be within 90 and 110%. The increase in values has been happening for the last 4 years. I was on a webinar with the Bureau of Local Assessments about 2 years ago, and I specifically asked the Bureau Chief of Local Assessments if they had considered to allow the assessors to value properties at maybe 80% of fair market value. And he told me point blank, absolutely not. If your values are not within that range, they need to get there. So we are aware that the sales are high, but we are bound by the laws. So based on the formula that they give us, the new median for the lakefront properties went from 71 to 92. And the new median for the town properties, or the non-lakefront properties, went from 87 to 95.
Can you speak up a little bit, please, Ann?
I'm sorry. They went from 71 to 92 for lakefront properties, and they went from 87 to 95 for residential properties. What's considered a fair market sale? And what we call an arm's length sale? Has to be a willing buyer and a willing seller. Nobody's under duress to sell. Has to be on the open market. A non-arm's length sale, the family sale, a sale to an abutter, a sale not on the market, foreclosure sale, divorce sales. These are all the things that the assessors need to look at when we're looking at the sales to determine whether or not that is a 100% fair market sale. So when we're looking at that, that's the first criteria we look at. Is it an arm's length sale or not? The next things that we look at is the style of the property, the style of the building. Colonials, capes, ranches, how are they selling? Are any selling higher than others? We also look at the age of the house. Is age playing a factor? Are people paying less money because the house is older? And then the biggest one is location. And the way we determine location is picture two houses, exactly the same. One's in town and one's on the lake. And somebody's willing to pay $125,000 more for the property on the lake, and it's the exact same house. That tells us that that land value, that site, is worth more than in town. That's how that impacts your value. We extract the value of the building from the sale price. We're left with what the land is worth. So location does impact your values. We compare neighborhoods. Based on the sales, we can see that. We can see if it's selling for more or less in certain neighborhoods and towns. It's not just lake properties that have the neighborhoods. We have 5 different neighborhoods. We have the deep lakes and the shallow lakes. We have the average neighborhood, and then we have an average plus 10 and a good. Some of the subdivisions in town sell for higher than other subdivisions in town based on their location. Again, that all goes in, we get all that information from the sales. So what happens after the sales are reviewed? The median gets set based on the data. Values get reviewed, and they get certified by the Department of Revenue. We were in a revaluation year this year. That means the Bureau of Local Assessments sends out our representative to the town of Sturbridge. She gathered all of the sale properties. She drove into all of those neighborhoods. She reviewed all of the factors. They take the same data we have and they put it through their reports to make sure that our reports are in line with where they should be. If ours aren't, we won't get certified. If we lowered the values, we won't get certified if they're not within that range. We are bound by the law. So in closing, when you receive your tax bill in the mail and if you still feel that your value is incorrect, by all means, you are entitled to file for an abatement. Specific time period for that, October 1st to November 1st, November 1st being the deadline. We have our applications and instructions on how to file an abatement online. I will be happy to mail it to anybody if they cannot access it online. Just remember that we cannot act on those abatements until October 1st. When abatements come in, the board reviews the information. We are going to do an interior and exterior inspection of your property. So when you file for the abatement, be aware, we do need to have access to the property. The board cannot make any decisions without having all the information. They have 3 months to act on these applications. And most importantly, if you file an application, it does not stay the payment of your taxes. So you need to still pay your taxes on time, and if something is warranted to be adjusted, it will be adjusted after the fact. And that's basically my presentation for the evening.
So we'd like to open it up to questions. Anybody?
Please remind him to use the microphone.
And yes,
Yeah, there's
please
2
use the
microphones.
microphone for the benefit of everybody that's watching online. Somebody has to be first. Go right ahead.
It's Scott Sanderson, 74 Paradise Lane. What is the new tax rate going to be per thousand?
We just got our tax rate certified on Friday. It is $15.93. That is a 56 cents decrease from last year. Last year's was $16.49.
And how does that compare to the commercial rate?
It's the same rate, ma'am. We have a single tax rate.
Right, so that's my point, right? We have so much commercialism in this town, so.
No, ma'am, we don't. At the classification hearing I presented to the Board of Selectmen, I stated, people think we have a lot of commercial in town. We have a lot of mom and pop commercial in town. We have 15, our tax base is 85% residential and 15% commercial, industrial, and personal property. Commercial is, I believe, 7%, industrial is 2%, and the personal property is 3.9 or something. What you need to understand too is personal property tax, that's a second tax that businesses pay. They pay a real estate tax and they pay a personal property tax. So they're already paying 2 taxes. And we have found that with 15% of a commercial base, a split tax rate doesn't work. You end up losing the businesses, and now the residential portion goes higher. So you're at 85-15. If you lose 5%, now you're going to pay 90% of the tax levy instead of 85.
One of
Just
the,
don't have a big.
and one of the things that's important about that is we talk about the levy and 2.5%, and the budget still grows more than that because we have other sources of revenue. I go back to that local receipt question. If you split that rate and you disproportionately put it on commercial and you lose economic development and growth, our 18%, let's say restaurants and hotels tax drops, that's a significant loss of revenue that we can't make up. The other thing is, as Ann points out, personal property tax. So every one of those businesses has equipment that's taxed, has, desks, furniture, computers that are taxed. That's a completely separate tax. That is another source of revenue. When we look at where our budgets grow, they pay those taxes as well. So the split rate, and I can tell you the split rate's a little bit risky because a couple of years back, and we saw it during COVID, when commercial property plummeted, towns that had a split rate, the residential properties got hit hugely. And those were towns where you had a closer, ratio, let's say. So it made more sense to have a split rate on a larger community. But in that particular year during COVID, I can tell you, the homes got hit so hard in those towns because the commercial rates plummeted. The commercial values, commercial land, as we know in a lot of the cities, went down. So there's a risk to a split rate. And for me, the real risk is the loss of economic development when you're talking about that personal property tax and the restaurant and meals tax coming back. That is a huge hit to revenue, which now does mean cuts in services.
Most of the cities and towns that have a split tax rate in Massachusetts have at least a 30% commercial base. That's when they can absorb it. A 15% commercial industrial base here, they can't absorb that. It's not a big enough split.
Questions?
As we can see, that property values increase faster by demand living on the lake. We can see what's happening now. We probably can't do anything about it now. But what are we looking for or looking towards in the future? Is this going to happen a lot more? And if it's so, are we pushing people out also who are on retirement fixed incomes that would love to live on the lake still, but it was never like that when they first bought it? I mean, yes, people are buying these. We bought ours a long time ago.
That's the hard part, is it's 5 of the 6 sales that were on the lakes were camps. Most people, when they buy a camp, are not buying it for the small little $60,000 camp or the $40,000 camp. They're buying it for the site, and most of the times they knock the camp and they build a house. We can't prevent that. We can only go by the law that we have to follow as assessors to value properties. That's where I say there's no bias involved. We can't take into consideration who owns the house, what their financial situation is, how long they've owned the house. I'd love to be able to say anybody who's 65 and on a fixed income and living on the lake, you know, we can cap you at this rate. It doesn't work like that. We can't do that. We have to follow the law. We have to use the data that we're given, and we have to keep it based on that.
That is the most unfortunate.
It's the hardest part.
Really the most unfortunate part, and you see it in oceanfront communities and lakefront communities. You know people who own family beach houses for years and years and years along the shore. Same thing, they sadly ended up taxed out of them. And it's, the law doesn't allow the latitude to discriminate, and I don't mean discriminate in a bad way, I mean discriminate in a beneficial way to the people who've had those in the family for years. But when somebody buys that camp and puts up a 3-story home on that same footprint, your values get disproportionately thrown off. And the problem isn't even just the house, it's what they actually bought that land for. And then once they put the house on, it goes up, you know, the value changes even more. But if they bought what, you know, theoretically was a $50,000, $60,000, $80,000, $100,000 lot, now they bought it for $300,000 or $400,000, you know, I mean, you can't tell your neighbors, please don't sell. You know, you can ask, but there's no good answer to your question. I hate to say it, and I hate to answer you that way, but there really is no good answer that we can think of, unless state laws change dramatically. There's really no good answer to that question. And I don't like answering you that way, but that's the only honest answer I can give you.
It's unfortunate, it's not at the Board of Assessor level. We don't have that authority to do that.
Paul Arshell, Birch Street. So the list that we got, was that just a sampling of the houses that sold on the lake, or were those all the houses that were
The
sold?
letter
on
that
the
you got,
Yes.
that was all the sales that took place.
Okay.
Yeah.
And,
And that is within the range, the Department of Revenue does allow that.
and
Actually,
So-
it was,
how do I compare my house to one of the houses from the list? Is it strictly by price, or does it matter if I have 5 bedrooms or 2 bedrooms, or?
you know, when you're comparing your property, you can compare it to other properties like yours and see where you're falling in your assessment. It doesn't have to be compared to one of the sales set the median.
Okay.
Everybody's values change. Now, what type of a house do you have, sir? is it a Colonial, a Cape?
A ranch, I
Okay.
guess,
So
yeah.
you would take your ranch and you would compare it to other ranches on the lakefronts and
With
see.
about an equal amount of property.
Yeah, you try to find comparisons.
So if you're on a quarter of an acre
No.
with a ranch, yeah, so if you're on quarter of an acre with a ranch, let's say, similar age, similar condition,
And I'm gonna.
those are all public, and that's all,
And
those are all
compare that to other houses on lake
yeah.
Well, if you're a lakefront,
that didn't sell?
Yep, because their values
No,
went
I'm
up
s-
based on those sales as well. It will defer. Yeah, you gotta jump in. Wow, he's a brave man.
I've been appraiser for 45 years. Sturbridge has been a long time client. I do this for 60 years. Everything Ann said is right on point. I'm going to answer this one question, and I don't want to involve the individuals. Good question. I would suggest you get a copy of your property record card. On their property record card, there are 1,500 different components of real estate value in general. Now, obviously, it doesn't apply to everything here. I would suggest you get a copy of your property record card and provide copies of the 6 sales. And just, if you have some Excel skill, if not, pencil and paper, list the data on the sale properties. Actually, again, we have a spreadsheet that we can send if you, again, are excellent competent. And just list the basic property data. This sale sold with X number of acres of land, probably less than an acre, X number of square feet, X number of condition, age, and then compare that to yours. And draw your own opinion. An appraisal, mass appraisal, fee appraisal is just a somewhat informed opinion. The mass appraisal venue is a little different than if you get a fee appraisal for a bank loan and stuff like that. That's my first stop. And certainly as you do that, if you have questions, forward them to the assessor office. Say, how do I analyze this? Well, without going into individual detail on all new properties, that's where you can start. Very simply, people buy price per square foot of building area, price per square foot of land. So the average sale price of the 6 sales that occurred is 1,500 square feet living area. You have a 1,500 square foot house, and most likely that house is very comparable to the 6. Work from there and work backwards. That would help you if you are agreeing when you get your tax bill with providing information to the assessor. The other thing I'm going to do is get a copy of your record card, copy of your property record card. Even though we do an ongoing inspection program in this community, it may have been 3, 4, 5 years since we got your property. Check to see that the data is accurate in your mind. Certainly the hard components of data are there. You have X number of bathrooms, you have X number of bedrooms, you have X number of square feet. And where you find that there is a discrepancy, real or in your opinion, you can all disagree on property condition, bring it to the assessors and let them do it. So as we move from this venue, which is mass appraisal, into looking at each of your own personal own property tax bills, because more of a fee appraisal type of scenario, certainly if you do appeal further to the appellate tax court, everything we talked about here, believe it or not, has no validity in the appellate tax court. It just becomes, you compare your properties to the sales that have occurred, the town will compare your property to the sales that have occurred, and the commission will get the decision. I will offer to the gentleman who asked the question, I think comes in future years. We have 10 sales on lake in calendar year 2024. The median assessed value, which is the comparison between the present assessment, the one that they're all not very happy about, and those sales prices at 0.89. So if we are at 0.92, and again, this is math and statistics, and we all know what statistics are. If your median for all lakefront property was at 92 this year, and it's at 89, that's a 3% gain in sale price, loss in value. That's probably right on par with the rest of the community. We haven't looked at that again. None of these sales had any basis in what you are currently seeing for assessment. It's just kind of hindsight after the fact. So moving forward, I don't think this tax increase probably, and it should be a tax increase, I can't sugarcoat that, will probably remain relatively constant now for the next couple of years. The market's soft and lakefront properties don't sell, but again, I can't predict what's going to happen.
But it won't be capped at 2.5.
Your individual won't. The total levy is.
I think that's the misconception.
That's the misconception on the, and thank you, by the way, I appreciate that.
Thank you,
I know,
Ron.
thank you very much. That's the misconception on the levy, and that's kind of why I came here, is because people think, oh, there's a 2.5% tax cap. It's not on your individual property, it's on the total. So,
On the total community.
so someone else might go up 1%, and you're gonna go up 3.5. I mean, it's,
Or the commercial real estate, or whatever.
well, their values go up too, so,
Same.
so that, you know, they go up too, and a lot of times they're going up more than 2.5%, depending on if commercial property takes a boom. When it took a huge hit during COVID, the next year, you know, things come back. So it is cyclical, it goes, you know, it's markets soften, markets get bullish and bearish in real estate too. But, yeah, the reality is some people on that 2.5, again, it's a total on the levy. So it depends, and that's why it depends on where you fall on the increase to the median value of everybody else's, the median home value increase. And so, yes, some people see more than that, some people see less than that.
I'm gonna try and finish up. So, just to be clear, so the list that we got, those were all of the lakefront properties that sold in 2023?
Yes.
So if I'm gonna do an abatement and I need to do a comparison, then I only have to work from that
Those
list?
six.
I don't have to look at other properties around the town?
No, no.
Okay,
Right. Yeah.
okay.
My question is how do we know,
Your name and where you live?
oh, sorry, Joe Murphy, 6 Birch Street. My question is, the houses that sold in 2023, how do we know that they weren't furnished? A lot of times on lake houses, they come with, like we bought our house, we got a boat, we got a boat garage, we got fully furnished inside. That could be driving the value of these houses way up that I don't think you guys are factoring in here.
We do factor that in. We do look at the multiple listings. We do send out sales questionnaires asking if there was any personal property involved in the sale. Like, for instance, there's a sale in 2024 that we have it assessed right now at $600,000. It sold for $1 million. It included 2 Sea-Doos. So we do look at that, and you would extract the personal property value out of that sale, and then you're still left with what the house and the land is worth. So we do look at all of that. Yeah. There's a lot that we have to look at when we are setting the values, yeah.
We want to look at what that was included in your original.
So just a quick question, how do you factor in the age of your house if you're trying to look at property values? Say you have a house that's 70 years old compared to somebody that has a brand-new home.
Yeah, so, well, we would have to look at that probably and change the depreciation to match it to see where it would fall. But you would just, you're gonna use your comparison. I guess you yourself probably can't factor in the difference for the age, but that's something that we can do. You know, we can just change.
Definitely adjust for it.
Yeah, we can change it on the computer to see where the value would fall, you know?
Don Miller, 501 Lead Mine Road. I think it would be useful if sometime in the near future you could have a session where you explained how the commercial industrial assessments are determined. Residential assessments seem to be pretty straightforward. There's comparables. That doesn't appear to be the case with commercial and industrial property. And given that it's, I was surprised by I would have guessed that the total assessments for commercial and industrial would have been higher than what you mentioned. So I think that would be interesting and informative to people to know how that's done. Is that possible?
Well, we actually do have 2 approaches to value for each type of property. So residential properties, we would normally use the sales approach is the big one, and cost approach. What does it cost to build a new single family? Those are the 2 types of values we look at. For commercial properties, we would look at cost approach because there aren't really a lot of sales of commercial properties, and the income and expense approach. We send out income and expense forms every year to all the businesses. They send us in that information so that we can look at that. To see.
Sounds like the
Those are
information they provide to you is what I'd say is on the honor system then.
I guess you could say that, but those are the 3 approaches to value that the Department of Revenue requires us to use.
Well, I would ask you to consider having a meeting where you explain the commercial industrial assessments in more detail than you're able to do today.
Okay, we'll take it under advisement.
Hi, Beverly Litchfield, 136 Lake Road, Big Alum. My question is, our home, my parents bought back in the 50s. Yes, we tore it down, built a year-round home to retire. It's not a vacation property, it's permanent home. We're on .24 acres. How do you compare our situation with, there's not too many places out there that are non-conforming lots protected by the state because of the grandfather clause or whatever you wanted to call it. So we were able to rebuild in that location. How do we find a lakefront property, .24 acres, you know, that we can compare our numbers with? Number of bedrooms, whatever.
Like Roy had stated, you're going to use the 6 sales that are there and do your best comparison to that. We can't, the 6 sales are not going to fit into a nice little box for everybody's property.
Right, but if they have like a half an acre or whatever, it really kind of, I mean, I know the land is the issue. I mean, it definitely is the perk to be living on the lake, but I'm just wondering how much, yes, we have a new home, but the land didn't change, you know, it's still .24. It's not a half, it's not a full acre, it's whatever.
So are you asking how we come up with under an acre, how we come up with the value?
Comparing it to another piece of property that may have sold, that may have been a half-acre lot, or...
So land is assessed on what they call a land curve, okay? And this is going to sound really strange. The best way I know how to explain it is a jar of peanut butter, okay? When you're looking at a jar of peanut butter, it's by unit cost. You have a small jar of peanut butter, it's got a higher unit cost. As you get bigger jars, the unit cost is going down, the jar is getting bigger. So same thing on a land curve. You have an acre of land, that's the higher price. Anything under an acre is going to be on a curve. It's not going to be, if you have half an acre, it's not going to be half of that full acre price, it's going to be on that curve.
On that grade.
So that's the best way I have of explaining the land curve.
So really, there's not going to be a way of us comparing on that list, because I'm pretty sure there wasn't one of the lake sales that would probably fit our property into the category.
We got a .19. Yeah, what's your, yeah.
Yeah, we're .24.
.24, yeah. We've got a .19, and then the next one is .41, so you're somewhere in between there.
The two of those.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did see the list on the spreadsheet online.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hey there, Taylor Isold, 174 Lake Road. I would like to second the having a meeting or some informational about how the commercial rates work, because I'm so confused by all of it, but I know that there are several large commercial properties in town that don't pay the full tax rate, correct? They get like a kickback, like Pilot. I remember there being this big thing about them having this huge convention center, but they haven't even broke ground on that. So are they already?
No, they're not. So,
yeah,
so those
how
are
does-
tax.
And I don't want to take away from today.
No.
But that was one question, and
Yeah.
because I don't understand how that works and why they're not paying their fair share. We're giving them the credits. But the big companies like Walmart and Pilot, like just name two, they don't pay their full. They're not paying the full rate, right? Don't they get like
Yeah, they do.
Yes, they are.
Oh, no, they do. So you're referencing what's called a TIF, a tax incentive to, say, to bring a company in.
Yep.
They do not get a reduction on what's already there. They don't get a credit back. So they buy a piece of property, they pay taxes as what that property is worth. How a tax incentive works, and again, these, by the way, go through town meeting. These are not like we just willy-nilly say, we're going to give so-and-so an incentive. So what happens is, when that building is built, there's an agreed-upon, typically a phase-in. So it's not that they get a reduction on what that property was already worth. It's that the phase-in to get to the new full value happens over an expected amount of time, typically like 10 years. So let's say they buy a property for $100,000, to use an easy number. They're paying taxes on whatever that $100,000 is worth based on that, like everything else. They anticipate putting up $1 million, investing $1 million. We know that 10 years from now, that's going to be a nice increase for our town. But if we ask them to pay that all the first year they're in business, let's say fully operational, many times that's not competitive for them. And so it's a phase-in. So we always get more every year. It depends on how it's worked. It might be 10% of the increase the first year, 10% the second, and usually it might go up evenly 10% all the way up. Sometimes you negotiate them where they're heavier loaded up front or heavier loaded on the back end, depending on the type of business and how long it will take them to get to that point. Every town has its own regulations on that, on how those work. But it's not a reduction from what that is. We always would be looking to get some increase. It's how much of the increase right away.
So yeah, so if there's ever like a way to, I don't know, explain things.
Yeah, you know, we absolutely could put together a little sort of seminar on things like that.
My other question is, like, just personally, we have a small house, fifth generation, living in the home, and it has increased 57% in 4 years. So we're 57% higher than we were 4 years ago, which is hard. But the house next door sold astronomically high. I mean, this house has no foundation. It's on stumps and cinder blocks, and it sold for probably $350,000 over what it would have appraised for. That's scary because that's going to put us at risk for the next few years. And there's another piece of property that was sold in the lake. So by requesting an abatement, how much are we putting ourselves at risk that you told me my house is worth $614 for 2025? If I ask for an abatement, because we haven't updated our house since 1991. I mean, we literally have 1991 carpet. Like, what am I putting myself at risk for? Could you come back after I ask for that abatement and say, hey, actually, I think your house is worth more than 614? When it was worth 300 just then.
Yeah.
So you
It
put
could
yourself,
go
like,
either way.
for requesting this abatement, you have put yourself at risk that you're going to actually be up higher for 2025.
That's correct in a way. It's not to put yourself at risk to say, hey, we're going to go out there and go, oh, we think this is worth, no. If there is something when we go out there that we discover that is not already being assessed on the card, then yes, we will add that to the card and assess it in the future.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
But I know that, so if you,
Right.
if you feel that you're going to get a full inspection, so you could come back and say, even though my house has not been updated.
That has happened in the past where we have gone out on abatement inspections and found finished basement that we didn't have.
But I think she's asking is and I don't know the answer, that's why I'm
Yeah,
asking.
that's
If
not
her
gonna come-
neighbor's
that's gonna come
house
up next
sold,
year.
Yeah.
right, is that
Yeah.
gonna hurt her this
No,
year?
it's 2026.
Right, that'll be
That's gonna be
26,
right.
right. Either way, whether you abate or not.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah,
The idea of the abatement is the abatement request is to confirm or find out that it's not accurate, that what we think you have. So we come out and we find, oh, you don't have 4 bathrooms? Okay, then you're paying too much because you're assessed on a bathroom you don't have.
We have what our property card says that we have.
Okay, so.
Then
it's-
you should
yeah,
be
so then
fine.
That's where it is, yeah.
yeah.
Hi, my name's David Karen, Karen Road in Cedar Lake. My question is that I'm going to use, I know you don't want to use personal stuff, but in comparison to the quarter-acre question, I've got 27 acres. Now, 600 feet of that is waterfront. Is the rest of the acreage being taxed as we take a look at it and say, oh, it's all waterfront property? Right, how do you determine that?
The first acre is normally determined as the site.
Okay?
Every additional acre after that is excess acreage. It's assessed at a much lower value.
Okay.
Okay?
All right,
So-
thank
And
you.
a lot of people ask if it's a buildable, if I can only build on this section of my property, is the rest to be, decreased because I can't build there? If it's within that first acre, that's your site. If you're able to build on it, that's your value for the first acre. There's no adjustment.
Thank you.
So I just like Chuck Roy, 188 Lake Road. I just want to sum it up so in my mind I understand, because we're mostly lake residents here. The 2.5
Lake residents are paying a bigger chunk of it. That's basically what it comes down to. And for 3 or 4 or 5 years, when I go back at my tax records, it was, it was the same, and all of a sudden, last year it went up, and then this year it's going up a bunch more. I understand everything's going up, but to this gentleman's point, it seems to me that we're getting close now to where the value should be that we've filled that gap, and we ought to see that slow down. Do you think that's true?
Hard to know until you have the facts. But what happened was lakefronts were in more demand. People were willing to really go to the mat to get them. It raises the value. There's people competing for them. And that's what Roy's point was. If people stop competing for them, then it'll settle down. We don't know till it happens.
I got you. I know the market, and the market could keep going up, but in my mind, I don't think that, well, I could be wrong, but I think it's kind of going to level out here. And if it levels out, I'm hoping that the taxes will level out.
So theoretically, if, let's say, you level out, but first-time homes become really competitive, and they go up disproportionately higher, let's say, and depending, and I've seen this happen with revals too, if first-time homes, the less expensive, if people were really tight, all of a sudden, their taxes,
So that would be a different, neighborhood.
that would be a different neighborhood.
You would compare that
Yeah,
differently.
if those all of a sudden become where they're outbidding each other, which is beginning to happen in some of those neighborhoods in different communities, then what you would see is sort of a leveling. But I think the point here that was really important in this is that out of that range that the state requires, that 90 to 110, you guys were at 0.71, and the rest of them were at 0.87. So you had to go up dramatically more to get into the state range, because you were actually at one point probably, not that you feel it, but at one point you were probably actually going up less than others.
I like that better.
I know you do, and I don't blame you. Don't we all?
One more question, Scott Sanderson, 74 Paradise. If the state law requires it to be between 90 and 110, how are we at 71?
So, okay. When we started looking at the sales data for fiscal 2025, okay, that was in, we started off with where.
Can I stop for a second? I'll make it
Yeah.
real short and sweet.
Okay, perfect.
2022 sales compared to your assessment were a median ratio of somewhere around 95. Okay? So what happened was sale prices escalated before we changed the assessments. Now the assessments have caught up to those sale prices. So we have always been in compliance every year. The market has shifted.
The faster the market shifts, the more
Yeah.
quickly that happens. And post-COVID, the market went nuts.
Rita Tassi on South Pond. I'd like you to comment and follow up on a couple of the comments made relative to the size of the lot, as in .25 versus .5, and also shoreline frontage. What impact, value-wise, do those factors have on our assessed values? I mean, one lot, whether it be 0.25 or 0.5 or 1 acre, is a building lot. Is there anything different in the lakefront properties that you would change or change the values because a .25 lot is 1/2 the size of a .5 acre lot?
No.
And does lake frontage, shoreline length impact value? I know what used to be, but
Yeah.
I'm just asking if you can explain that to us.
Look at me, Bob.
All right, I'll just give, oh, go ahead.
You don't, when you buy property, you don't give a check for land, you check for building, you give a check for the whole amount. Okay? Now, obviously, when you buy property as a prospective buyer, you're looking at all the ambiance of the property. You're making a qualified decision. In our business, we are showing location primarily by land value. And we do have a sliding scale, but it's not a straight proportion. It's on a curve. We are establishing a foundational value for that total value to include land. And it's, so if 1 acre is worth $200,000, a half an acre is not worth 100. It was good enough to build on, and it's going to carry, say, 75 or 80% of that 1 acre value, because that was minimum required necessary to put the house on the lot. So you will see a small scale difference between an acre, 3/4 of an acre, half an acre, but it's proportionally fairly small because the quality of the lot, its mass appraisal was good enough to build on. I understand the question about shorefront. We do not necessarily look at shorefront as part of that. Coincidentally, one of the sales that you brought to my attention today actually has a very minuscule amount of shorefront.
Yep.
It's still sold for 300 some odd
5 feet.
dollars.
Yep.
So no, we have not addressed that. Now, having said that, I fully recognize that not everybody's peach is the same. I've done this in so many lakefront communities. That could be an issue you'd like to bring forward, because that becomes property specific to you, where we are doing this and we're painting with a very broad brush because it is mass appraisal. If you think there is something, you certainly aren't going to tell us if it's a superlative, I get that. If it's something you consider deficient to your property value, that you think it would be a deficiency in terms of getting a fair market price for your property, then by all means list it. It would be a judgment decision, and then would become up to the assessor to make a judgment decision.
Absolutely.
And one other thing, so if you follow the papers, I work in Palmer, we had exactly this on the Lake Thompson district, 52 properties. Never had any sales. We ended up with 6 sales and a dramatic increase in property values. Everybody complained, we had public meetings. We ended up with, I don't know, 5 or 6 abatements to appellate court cases. But what I'm going to throw out there for you for a little bit of hope is, in ensuing years, for whatever reason, the Lake Thompson sales actually came in 2 percentage points lower than the increase for in-town properties. So in answer to one of the questions about what to expect in years to come, I can't predict past 2026. Who knows what the sales will be in calendar year 25, 26, 27. But in that particular instance, and I think in answer to your question about how this is monitored, it will be on an annual basis year to year. And as I said, the beginning meeting with only a portion of the year reported for calendar 2024 sales on the lake meeting in the night. So I would expect that you will not see a dramatic change in property value different from the rest of the properties in town for at least 1 year. Again, that's a partial. Who knows what's going to come with sales in September, October, November, December.
Yep.
We'll wait and see. But there is that potential for good news for you. I will say one other thing. We had a lot of discussion about commercial industrial values. There's no relationship between your property values, commercial and industrial. We do an income approach. We do have $8 million properties. We took go to the appellate tax court quite a bit on Walmart and the other, because they're generally unhappy with the property value. It is a completely totally different assessment practice because you don't have sales. And I do collect income information on the honor system. I use LoopNet. I use MLS. I use 8 or 9 different national publications, especially on properties that have a more regional flavor, like your shopping centers as opposed to mom and pops. And we do assess those at the detective office.
One more thing. In a conversation I had with Ann, and you can verify this because you were at the state, Sturbridge is not unique with this lakefront sudden value increase. It's something you have to accept, I guess.
Exactly. Actually, that's not my community saying, thank goodness. Their open meetings have been extraordinarily hostile. I have to thank you. This is one of the best meetings of this. Very good. Of course, I know when you walk out the door, you can take my name and change it. That's all right over here.
What is trying for me to move?
My name's Ann's husband.
Now I got 2.
Yeah, right.
Your work husband.
My work husband.
Other work husband.
My
other work husband, yes.
Yeah, that costs you.
Paula Lopez, I'm at Leadmine. I'd like to know what percentage of the total tax revenue for Sturbridge is paid by lakefront, lake property owners?
I'll have to get.
I'd have to get back to you on that one.
Yeah, we'll have to get that to you.
That one I'd
That's-
have to, I'd have to do some research for you, Paula, and get back to you on that one. Was not prepared for that question.
Yeah, we can figure that out, though.
Yeah, but we will definitely.
Yep.
Sure. Sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can put that, no, not a letter, we'll put it on the website. We'll put it on the website so everybody can see it.
There's one more thing, Ann, that you probably all know, but on South Pond, for instance, there are a couple properties that are sold. One of them went into the 2023 collecting, right? But one's coming up in 2024 that will be used for next year's valuations. Their second homes paid $1 million at cash. That is what's happening and not doing us any favors. Maybe some of
You know, when they come to look at your neighbor's house, hang your laundry on your front lawn, put some trash out on the lawn. That's how you keep your properties low. Make sure your property looks terrible. Yeah, make sure you just make a mess with it, looking at the neighbor's house. I didn't say that. That was just my inside voice.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
Lindsay Boyers, Birch Street. For the non-lake houses, what was the data set for appraisal? How many houses sold and how was the average?
80 sales.
So I work in data, and 6 data points is generally considered inaccurate data. So if I wanted to do a mass appraisal based on 6 data points, it would not be accepted. So I'm just wondering how you mitigate that and account for outliers. Like if someone came in and wanted to spend $2 million on a house that was worth $300,000, obviously that would throw off the average.
Right. That's when we go back to the arm's length and non-arm's length sales, and we have to look at everything that was impacting that sales. So that would be something out of the realm. You know, like if somebody paid $2 million for a property that's worth $348,000, we're gonna have to look at that and try to figure out what's going on there.
But don't we feel like that's kind of what happened with COVID? Like people were paying more than houses were actually worth because.
But it wasn't, the anomaly is the thing. It wasn't, if all 6 of those went up dramatically, which they did.
But there were some that were 20 and some that were 62. To me, that's still a decent difference. And when you only have a 6-point data set, and using the average, it just seems kind of unfair to do a mass appraisal.
That is the sales that we had. The Bureau of Local Assessments said that that was enough sales to do our data review.
Is there a minimum?
I can't create more sales.
What if 2 houses sell next year? Is there a minimum for that approval?
If there was 2, I don't know, maybe we'd have to go back 6 months prior or go forward 6 months.
That would be the state, actually, the state would actually have to
But the
approve
Department
that.
of Revenue told us those 6 sales are enough to set your values. So
I
we
mean, we
can't
are
create
governed.
more sales, but,
It
you
is
know,
governed.
if they did not accept that, they would have given us directive to say, okay, now maybe you need to go expand that back 6 months or forward 6 months, but they said, nope, that is absolutely, you have enough.
We can take it up with at the Department of Revenue.
No.
If
No.
I may, I come into this with open arms. I have Walmart headquarters, and I have, I don't know, 15, 20 communities of waterfront sales. And every one of those communities, with the exception of Pollock, being the only exception, waterfront sales were higher than in-town sales. So that didn't really figure in, other than a general idea for when we did our initial analysis. But if that's the norm in the Brookfields and the one that newer sales, if that, unfortunately for you, that more. I understand your point about data sets, and certainly we'd like to have 2 or 3%. But what I try not to do is try to change a class of property based on one scale. And the Department of Revenue, and we have in the past here, specifically in Sturbridge, at a single waterfront sale that was well outside the norm, meaning sold for higher. And we did not use that scale to raise all of the property values. One sale is particular between the buyer and one seller. Here, because 6 is not a great amount, but it is more than sufficient, given that every sale was dramatically higher than the 6 and all the other property components. Like, was it peak, was it range, how old was it, how much land, et cetera, et cetera. So it's just not the sale price, it is the totality of the property.
Hi, Lisa Sanderson, 704 Paradise Lane. I don't have a question, I have a comment. So we live on a beautiful lake, and we pay a lot of money in taxes, and we get practically no services from the town. Our road gets plowed in the wintertime, and that's about it. So if we're going to pay these taxes at a higher rate than everybody else in town, then the town should step up and help us maintain our roads and fix the potholes and do what we need to do, because we get practically nothing on the lake roads around around Big Allen.
So I would like to say, ma'am, our greatest percentage of your taxes is spent primarily in public safety. You do have police, you do have fire, you do have snow plowing, you do have recreation, you do have a council on aging, you do have zoning and building to make sure your neighbors don't do something ridiculous that they're not allowed to do, and we do fill potholes, though we are behind on it. I admit we are behind on pothole filling. But we do provide, you are eligible for all services. The only thing you really don't get is basic road paving. We don't grade and pave roads.
So there's a 5,000, so Taylor, on 174 Lake Road. So there's currently, I believe, a $5,000 private road patch fund with the town budget each year, right? If I remember from the town meeting.
Yep.
$5,000.
That's for the pothole filling, yes.
So the town meeting has been moved to April. So we have to have all the changes for that meeting in by beginning of November. So how do we, who are paying this much higher tax, how do we get that private road patch budget increased from $5,000 to say $20,000 for next year? How do we go about doing that?
Finance committee meeting. When it's
We
presented,
attend
I
the
would say
finance
when
committee
it's-
meeting.
Yeah.
So that would be one step.
Or to
would
me.
be-
I'm getting, the finance director's pointing at me. So I'm hearing you right now talk about it.
Okay.
And I absolutely would.
That
would
may be
Heather-
helpful.
Yep.
If
when
we
our-
can drastically increase that private road patchwork, then that would assist a lot of us in what we're paying
And I'm going to
for.
tell you the truth that right now, it's not just the amount of money, it's actually just literally help. We are short-staffed. It's
But with
the
more
money
money, you
isn't.
could outsource this. My company could be
Yep.
hired to fill potholes
So
with more
you've just
budget.
sort of put it on the radar.
Yep.
And then what happens is when the budget comes out and is ready to go to finance committee, you're going to look at that, or when I present it to the board of selectmen, you're going to look at it. If that number has not gone up, you come to a board of selectmen meeting, you ask them, they're going to ask me. If I didn't raise it, maybe it's because I have plenty of money, but just couldn't get to it, for whatever the reason, there might be some reason. And then we go from there. But you have, the public process, that, through the whole budgeting process, absolutely pay attention to that.
Because we understand that you can't repay.
But it's
the
on my
road,
radar now.
But we can increase the, hopefully increase the
You
budget
just put it on
too.
there, so, yeah, absolutely. I do have to run into an ARPA meeting, but, quick one, do you need me, or? Assessors? Okay, I'm gonna run to ARPA. Thank you, I just want to say thank you all.
Robin.
For such a respectful meeting.
Thank
And
you.
my door's always open, if it's assessor stuff, talk to them, but if it's general budgeting and taxes and how all that works, please never hesitate to reach out to me.
Thank you.
Thanks, Robin. Mark Smith, 186 Lake Road on Big Alum. Let's see, a couple things. First, point of clarification, Ann. You said the property values went from 255K to 482K, and you said that was over 10 years,
10
but I
years.
thought you said that was from 2005 till now. Or was it?
Oh, I'm sorry. Did
So
I
I'm trying to
misspoke.
clarify what time
Yep.
frame that was.
Yep, hold on.
I mean, was it over the last 19 years, or?
No, I think I misspoke on my year there. Hold on a minute. No, it's right here. I think it was 2015. I said 2005. I
Right, okay, so the
apologize.
last
Yeah, it
10
should have
years,
been 2015.
basically.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. So,
Typo.
not quite doubled, but close to doubled in the last 9, 10 years, in that range, okay. Let's see. So the levy rate is dropping from $16.49 a thousand to $15.93.
That's correct.
A thousand, if I understand correct. So that's a decrease of 3.4%. So that's good news for all of us. I mean, our assessed values are going up. I did an informal poll on our lake, just asked some friends, and the range that I saw was assessed values increasing from 10 to 23%, in that range, 10 to 23%. So if we take 3.5 off of that, that means our taxes will actually go up just on those people, from between 7 and 20% in the coming year. But what it also tells me is if the levy rate is dropping, the mill rate is dropping by almost 3.5%, are the rest of the houses having flat taxes this year, or are they actually dropping some? I'm talking about the tax amount, like the dollar amount that they pay.
So your total single-family home, again, you have many different categories of property here. Let's stay with one once. Your single-family home property values went up 11%. The lakefront and non-new construction properties went up about 9%. So if you do the math backwards, 9% less 3.5%.
About 5.5.
See that percentage.
Their taxes are going up by 5.5%.
Again, that's a very, very general statement.
Well, that confuses me, because if our taxes are going up between 7 and 20% this year, and the non-lakefront are going up by 5.5% this year, how does that translate into only a 2.5% overall increase on properties?
Because, very simple, there is not 2.5% of an increase over property. You're talking about your levy limit. So if you raise $1 million last year, that's the total amount that Proposition 2.5 allows, then you can only go up 2.5% to $1 million. However, everybody's individual share of that $1,025,000 can be different depending upon what your assessment is. So the town can only levy 2.5% more than last year's levy increase, to which you then divide into the total property tax to get your tax rate.
Only 2.5% more. Yeah, but if my taxes are going up by 12, 15, 18%, and the average house, non-lakefront, is going up by 5.5%.
So there are some, again, we deal with averages. There are people out there in the neighborhood, probably we're having tax decreases. I
don't think so.
But there's a possibility that people have property values that decline. She just said no.
I said I don't have that information.
Maybe I need to speak with Ann about that privately, because I still don't understand how the numbers work on that. This is just a comment in general, and I want to let my friends know this too. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice today. In the last 23 years since the turn of the century, on average in the United States, compound inflation is 67%. 23 years, compound 67%. The average residential home in the United States in that same 23 years is up 160%. My point is that I think most of us intuitively would know that home prices are going up faster than inflation. So the mill rate better be going down. I mean, it is going down this year, but I'm saying in general, in the last 23 years, I don't know, I didn't live here 23 years ago, but I hope the mill rate's going down.
Whenever values go up, normally, when values go up, the mill rate goes down. If values went down, usually the mill rate would go up.
Okay.
Normally, that's how it works.
Again, because you can only go up 2.5%, it's algebra.
2.5%.
So if one goes up, the other has to come
Right.
down.
Yep.
Yeah, there's a redistribution going on, for sure. So, and then the last thing I'll say, I had a good conversation with Ann last week, and what I really came away from is your hands are largely tied by the state. The Department of Revenue sets out these regulations. They actually bring in assessors to double-check your work to make sure it falls within their parameters. And there's not much, in the 90 to 110%, you can't go down to 70% like Connecticut can. So there's relatively little that you can do unless people got together and went to Boston and somehow changed rules at the state level. I know, good luck with that. Okay.
Yep, that's where we are at now.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Any final questions?
I just wanted to say thank you.
Welcome.
Well,
You're very welcome.
I would, yeah. I would like to say thank you for such a positive meeting. It's great to be able to discuss the facts and give you the information so that it doesn't make it easier to pay your taxes, but maybe if you understand the process a little bit better, you understand that we're being fair, we're following the rules that we have to follow. But thank you all for being just very courteous.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay.